Hi, everyone. As you're getting ready to write or submit your Step 1A for your project, if you feel like you're a little uncertain or you just like to listen to this, I wanted to provide two concrete examples of a literacy practice with a very specific focused text. So my first example, comes from the work of Brian Street, and this is dating back to 1984. It's annotated in our bibliography, but Street did his initial work in the 70s. I call him the godfather of literacy, but his work really informed a lot of the writing that I did. So he went to Iran, to this very rural village in Iran, and he wanted to look at the ways people engaged with text in this very rural village where there was probably a lot of oral tradition and maybe not as much reading and writing. And the people spoke Farsi, but they were Muslims. And so one of the literacy practices that really got his attention. And of course, we didn't have this language of sociocultural perspective and literacy practice at the time, was the men in the village would attend a religious kind of school, a maktab it was called, and they would be reciting from the Quran, which is a very important text, a very yes, important text to them for their lifestyle for many reasons. But the people, they spoke Farsi, and I am told the Quran is always written in Arabic. So they did not speak, read, or write in Arabic, yet the book itself is in Arabic. And what Street started to observe was that the men could open the Quran, and mind you, I am completely illiterate in the Arabic language. I don't know what is the right orientation of this book, but the men in the village knew how to orient the book up, down, right to left, and they could follow along with their finger on the page. They would all recite together the different passages and prayers, even though they were not decoding the words off the page. It wasn't about spelling and reading comprehension and fluency. It was about this practice that day after day, week after week, year after year, they would probably go and observe and participate in these practices with this very special text. Even though they were not decoding the words, they still knew the words. They knew the words had meaning to them. This very special text would position them in a certain way as righteous followers of the teachings in this book. And Street began to contrast what he was seeing there with the notion that people could be illiterate. You wouldn't call someone who can work with this text illiterate, but the literacy wasn't about these discrete skills. And so he kind of started this big compare contrast with what he was calling ideological model of literacy, and later became the socio-cultural view of literacy, with what he was calling the autonomous view of literacy. We might think of it as decontextualized skills. So it would be hard to pinpoint the decontextualized skills in doing this, but they wouldn't be the reading components, would they? The skills would have to be how they've come to learn what all of this means, why it's important, how to hold the book, memorizing the words they would need to say, but it wasn't at all about discrete literacy skills. So anything written by Street, there's a rather large body of work. He passed away in 2018, but there's a lot out there on him. And I think I've actually referenced at least a couple of them in our annotated bibliography. Very good stuff. And this whole thing is the introduction to his book here, Literacy in Theory and Practice. So that's one concrete example. And the second concrete example is my example from ADLT 650 all the way back to 2012, I believe. And we had the 123 project back then too. I think it's evolved a little, but kind of stayed the same. And so my 123 project was called the Traveling Blue Form. And my focal text happened to be printed on blue paper, but it was the intake form used at an adult education program where I worked. And I was an ESL teacher. So a lot of the students that I worked with had a difficult time with English, much less reading the English on this rather complex form they had to fill out when they came to register for a class. And I always had these sort of nagging feelings about this form, but I didn't have the words and the language and like a theoretical understanding or lens to talk about it. So when it came time to take this class, I knew the first day of class that I was going to do my project on the blue form, but I was already working in the field of adult literacy and I already knew the person who created this class, Bill Muth. So anyway, the traveling blue form. So the blue form would first be encountered by students who would have to check all these boxes about gender, of course, very binary, right? Gender and how much education they had, Hispanic, not Hispanic, if they receive certain benefits or not. I mean, it was beginning to position the students in ways that they wouldn't ordinarily identify themselves. They didn't think of themselves in a certain way. Some of them didn't like the word Hispanic. They said, I'm not Hispanic, I'm Latina. So I could then sort of understand, and I developed the language and the understanding about how to talk about it. But the students would encounter the blue form. And then as the teacher, I would get the blue forms and I'd have to get my information off of them that I needed to do my teaching. And then the blue forms would go over to the program administrators and they would have to extract the data points and put them into the state information system. And then the form or information from the form would travel up to the state level where the state would glean specific demographics they needed for reporting. So there were all these different levels of people in adult education encountering the blue form and the blue form's data. The blue form itself started to get kind of beat up over the semester. It was kind of on this thick cardstock kind of paper. Sometimes the students would fold it and we'd all go, oh, don't do that. So this form was this sort of, it sparked a lot of controversy and discussion. And as teachers, we always had to make sure we had them secured and we could account for them. So my project was about the blue form and how it positioned the students and had them identify themselves in ways that they didn't maybe really like or want to do. And it gave them an understanding of how the adult education program was then thinking of them and categorizing them. You are this, you are not this. How much formal education did you have? You are low educated. And I just went to town on it. I went crazy on it. So it was a good text in that many different levels of people encountered this text. The text itself had some kind of controversial things about it. It was a complex text, lots of writing. I think it was 4 pages or like a big double folded thing with the front and back. It was just a great text to use for the project. So when you're writing up your step 1, you need to have a specific text of focus. And it's great if it's a kind of a text that different groups encounter, and maybe there's something about it that's kind of controversial, or it bugs you, or it bugs other people, or people aren't doing what they're supposed to do with it, or they're whatever it may be, or they can't access it, or whatever the case may be. a controversial text, and then of course the context in which all of this takes place with people engaging with the text. I hope this was helpful, and I really look forward to seeing what you have to say in your step A about your project.